everybody, my name is Dawn Kuhn and thank you so much for joining me today. I'm the creator of the website www.embraceyournormal.com. I've written all the content on the website, but today I'm coming to you not as an author of a website, but just as a mom. Because really, most importantly, I'm a mom. And I'm a mom like most other moms. I normally wear yoga pants, my hair's in a messy mom bun, I live for the first cup of coffee every day, I run around ragged, drag myself to bed every night, I'm so tired. I'm just a mom. I'm a mom like most other moms, with one very big exception. My children have mental health disorders. I have a son who's 12 who is bipolar, and I have a son who is 11 who has high functioning autism and pretty severe ADHD. And while my kids have been diagnosed for about 5 years, which has been a pretty good while, so I'm a little past where you probably are if you're watching this, I have pretty much learned to fully embrace my somewhat crazy normal, if you will. I've learned how to embrace having children with mental health disorders, but it took me a while. It took me quite a while. And I've been able to get there, and I know you'll be able to get there too. It's been a while since I've asked myself the question, now what? Now what do I do? Because I'm kind of in a rhythm with my kids. But I was there. I was you. I absolutely was you. I was in your spot. I was feeling all of the feels that you're feeling. I've been there, okay? I am you. So I want you to know that. If I could, I would jump through the camera and give you a big giant hug. But since technology hasn't quite figured out how to do that yet, I thought I would just try to provide some insight on my journey and how I dealt with that initial, my child was just diagnosed, now what question. I want to share parent-to-parent, virtual face-to-face, if you will, what I wished someone had shared with me 5 years ago when I first started my journey. Because I didn't have that. And I had to learn it all by myself. And I learned it through lots of trial and error. And when I say lots of trial and error, girl, man, I mean lots of trial and error. The idea for this video came from a very dear friend of mine whose daughter was just diagnosed as bipolar. And she sent me a text and she said, Dawn, my daughter was just diagnosed. I feel so overwhelmed. I don't know what to do first. I don't know what to do right this minute. I need some advice and some tips. I need help with this now what question. And boy, did it resonate with me, because I remember 5 years ago when I was so overwhelmed when my children were diagnosed. So my heart really went out to this friend. And I was totally honored that she asked me that question and that she felt like I could be a good resource for her. But I was completely perplexed by the question, sort of that now what question. And the reason is, when I first started my website and writing articles about how to embrace your normal when you're a mental health mom, my kids were already diagnosed. I had already stumbled through those first few months in a fog, feeling completely overwhelmed by the situation. Like I had already gone through that, and nobody was there to tell me or answer that now what question for me. I had already gone to even like that really dark place, feeling riddled with guilt, constantly asking myself, like, how did I not know? How did I not know this? That how did I not know burned through my head day in, day out. Other questions, did I do something that caused this? Could I have prevented this? Could I have made the pain that they're going through any easier? Just riddled my brain. It weighed really heavy on my mommy heart. And I imagine if your child was just diagnosed, you are asking yourself many of the same questions right now. That's okay. That's normal. That's healthy. You got to walk through that. And hopefully some of the ideas I'm going to give you today will help you do that. So in order to answer my friend's question of sort of now what do I do first? I really had to look back and reflect using that old, if I knew then what I know now sort of mantra. I'm not a doctor, not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm just a mom. I'm just a mom. And I'm just a mom sharing her journey. So I went back and I thought about, okay, if I knew then what I know now, how would I answer that now what question? And I went and met with my friend, and we spent about 3 hours together, and I shared whatever insight I could. And I felt like having that face-to-face time instead of like just reading an article or a book about it was valuable. And that's why I decided to address this topic in a video format instead of just a written article. So I'm kind of like the author coming out from behind the text with this first video. Okay, so with that said, I mentioned earlier, I learned a lot through trial and error. I mean, my husband and I made so many mistakes along the way. And when I say many, like, I don't mean a few. I mean numerous, innumerous, countless, like, as my kid would say, a gabillion, jillion mistakes. Many, many, many mistakes. But perhaps the very, very biggest mistake that I made in the beginning was thinking that if I did my research about the disorders and I talked to the doctors, I would be able to get my arms around this whole bipolar and autism thing. In other words, if I did my work as a mom, I would be able to have a comprehensive understanding about what was going on and what needed to be done. Like, I'm going to do my research, I'm going to talk to the doctors, I'm going to make my little plan and my cute little notebook, and then I'm going to have a comprehensive understanding, and we're going to move forward, and the problems are going to be solved. And then I could control the situation. I mean, as parents, isn't that all we really want, is to be able to control bad situations in our child's life? To be able to control the bad stuff and make everything better for them? I mean, that's all we really want as children. So the biggest mistake I made was thinking that I was going to be able to get a hold of this whole mental disorder thing. And now 5 years later, when I think back at the time where I thought I could do that, I thought I could get control and have a complete understanding of these disorders, it's downright comical. And I can actually literally laugh out loud about it, because the reality is that mental health disorders evolve. Mental health disorders evolve. Symptoms change, and normals are constantly redefined, even 5 years later. My son's bipolar, my other son's autism and ADHD constantly evolves. We're having to redefine our normal on a daily basis. Constantly redefined. But I didn't know that then. But I know it now, and I can share that. So learning early on, no matter how hard you try, you are not going to be able to control this narrative. You are not going to be able to control the narrative in regards to your children's mental health disorders. I think understanding that from the get-go, right out of the gate, is honestly will be critical for your sanity. It really will. Because if you spend your whole time like a hamster in a wheel trying to gain control of the situation, if I just do a little more, I'll get control, I'll have an understanding, everything will fit. It's just not going to be that way. So the sooner you understand that and recognize that, I think the better luck you have of keeping your sanity through the whole thing. Let's just say that. I sort of think of it now like a puzzle. And I have a little real puzzle here. Let me see if I can get this right. Okay, I sort of think of it now like a puzzle. You know, when my boys were first diagnosed, I desperately wanted to figure out how all the pieces fit together. You know, like in a regular puzzle piece. And if I could fit all these pieces together, then that would help me know how to handle their disorders. You know, the pieces like the medicines and the therapists and the diet changes, all of these were pieces of a puzzle that I knew I had to put together, but I wasn't quite sure how. Now, the control freak side of me, the control freak side of me wanted to start with the outside, how do I hold this straight? With the outside borders of the puzzle. Because when I was a kid, that's what I did. I always started the puzzle with the outside borders. In other words, you define the full picture and then you fill in the pieces. And that's how I always knew it. I always thought that that was the right way to handle putting a puzzle together. I wasn't quite sure what those middle pieces were going to look like, but I knew that if I did what I practiced as a child and I kind of worked on the big border pieces first, you know, deep down in my mommy soul, I needed those border pieces. I needed that big picture, if you will. I needed the big picture, the big outline, to feel like I had a grip on things, to feel like I had some sense of control while my family's world as we knew it was blowing up and spinning out of control. I needed that. To me, borders, like the borders in a puzzle, equals definition. It equals boundaries. It equals control to me. And then everything else would just fill in the middle. And so that's how I approached in the beginning trying to figure out how to get my arms around this mental health disorder. I just thought, if I can do the outside border, if I can get my arms around it, the rest of the pieces will just fill in. The problem with that is that there are no border pieces in a mental health puzzle. There are no border pieces. There are constantly new pieces being added. In other words, the mental health puzzle looks like this, where there are no borders. Pieces are constantly added. So you put these pieces and then these pieces are added. And then you think you got it made and you think you understand it, and then the season of life changes and these pieces are added. And there's never a border. It just keeps going and going and going. You put the first 1,000 pieces together, you think you got it. But nope, then they hit puberty and then 1,000 more pieces come. And it's just a never-ending puzzle with many, many pieces that have no border. So that was really new to me. I had to get my head around that the mental health disorder the mental health disorder puzzle doesn't come in a box with 1,000 pieces, neat little perfect pieces, where once you do the work, you have a complete picture. Because you're never done with the work when your child has a mental health disorder. You never truly have all the pieces. There is no border. So I had to learn that if I wanted to answer that now what question, I had to sort of start from the center of the puzzle and establish a firm core, never can hold these things straight, and establish a firm core and work from there. If I establish this firm core, then as seasons of life come for my children and more pieces are added, I have a strong foundation to build from. Like, it's okay that there's no border. I can just keep adding on from my firm foundation, from my core. And my goal today is I want to talk about what I think these 6 pieces are to help you establish your core, your foundation for how to handle your child's mental health disorder. Coming to that realization that there were no borders on this puzzle was huge for me. I mean, it hit me like a lightning bolt. It helped me immensely. It took me a while to get there, to understand that. But once I did, it really helped my mindset. So much so that I see the very first piece of the puzzle that we should talk about today, understanding the puzzle mindset. And when I say understanding the puzzle mindset, what I mean by that is understanding that there are no borders, that you really have to figure out how to establish a core foundation that you can build on, and setting realistic expectations that the puzzle will never be finished or completely solved. You'll be able to manage the many facets of the disorder. You'll absolutely be able to manage the many facets of the disorder that are thrown at you, but you'll never be completely in control of it. You'll be able to manage the facets that are thrown at you, the pieces of the puzzle that are thrown at you, but you'll never have complete control over it. You'll never be able to put a pretty border around it and say, now I get it all. Understanding that is such a critical component, I think, to answering the now what question. You also have to recognize that you can't take the hurt away from your child. They have to experience it and put the puzzle pieces together on their own, as it applies to them, at their age, with their capabilities. Your kids are going to have to be able to identify what the core coping skills that they're going to need in order to survive their disorder day to day. So taking a deep breath and realizing this whole puzzle mindset is the first thing that I would do from a now what perspective. And next, what I would do is I would go out and purchase a journal. I would take a deep breath and I would purchase a journal. Now, I know, saying, oh, you should just journal about that. You should just journal about that. It's almost cliche. Like everybody says, oh, you should journal about that. Any therapist you go to in the world is probably going to tell you that you should journal about that. But I mean it. Like, I'm not joking. You have to purchase a journal and write down every single word, emotion, sentence, phrase, picture, thought, everything that's going through your mind right now. Doesn't have to be complete. It doesn't have to make sense to anybody but you. Nobody has to see it but you. But whether it's good, bad, ugly, happy, sad, depressed, dark, nasty, angry, whatever it is, you have got to write it down and get it out. You have to recognize what emotions you're feeling and you have to walk through them. No matter how hard they are to walk through, and I know how hard they are to walk through because I've walked through them before and I walk through them with you as you go through them. But you have to do it. Being a parent of a child with a mental health disorder is a marathon and not a sprint. And this will get you off on the right foot. You have to get that out. You have to get it out and you have to walk through it. Because I can tell you that if you bury your feelings from day one, if you say, you know what, I need to take care of my kids. So what I'm feeling about this, I'm just going to push down. For right now, I'm just going to push it down because taking care of my kids is the most important thing. So me feeling sad or me being frustrated or me being depressed, I'm going to push that down. If you bury your feelings from day one, you will become very depressed and very overwhelmed. I know this from experience. It will greatly impact your ability to be your best self in helping your children. Don't bury those emotions from day one. Don't do it. My advice to you is to acknowledge your emotions, journal your emotions, feel your emotions, walk through your emotions from day one, minute one, second one. Don't bury anything. Just don't do it. It won't have a good outcome. Now, there are a few articles on my website, embraceyournormal.com, that can help you with this. And a couple of them are an article called Why Me, an article called What is Normal, and an article called Grieving the Living. It's a great article on dealing with sort of the loss of the child that you thought you were going to have and why it's okay to grieve that. So I encourage you to look at those articles on the website. Okay, moving on to our next puzzle piece. Our next puzzle piece, in my opinion, to help establish that core is contacting your school, if your child is in public school, that is. If your child is in public school, contacting your school in relation to requesting a 504 meeting. Now, if you don't know, a 504 meeting is one that includes your children's teachers, counselors, and administrators. And the goal is to sort of create kind of a blueprint, if you will, for how the school can and should, let me say that again, can and should provide support and remove any barriers for students with disabilities. And that can be a mental or a physical disability, either one. So it basically ensures that the student, your child, has equal access to general education curriculum. You can research more about what a 504 is, what an IEP is. You may have heard that term also, kind of similar to a 504 with a few differences. I don't want to bore you with charts and graphs and bullet points and all of that. But the bottom line is you need to contact your school if your child's in public school and schedule a 504 meeting immediately after your child is diagnosed. If your child is already under 504 accommodations at school, then you need to schedule a meeting to discuss any and all changes in the diagnosis that may have occurred. And not just in the diagnosis. If there's a change in medications, there's a change in behavior, if there's a change in a diagnosis is added or taken away, any of that, the school has to know. And here's why. Think about this for a minute. 7 days in a week, last time I checked, right? Typically in a week, if your child's in public school, they go to school 5 days a week, right? 5 out of 7, that is a majority. Your child's teacher spends more waking hours with your child than you do. You're with your kids all day Saturday and Sunday. Your teachers and counselors and administrators are with your kids all day Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They spend more time with your kids than you do. It's critical that you keep them abreast of everything going on with your child from the very beginning, or they can't help you. They can't support what you're doing at home in the classroom if you don't tell them what you're doing at home. Starting that relationship early on, immediately after the diagnosis, will help you immensely as you walk through this process. It's a huge answer to the now what question. Now, I don't have any articles on my website that relate specifically to 504 accommodations in public schools. We had a wonderful experience with it. I probably should write an article about it, but we had a great experience about it when we were in public school. But we ended up making the decision to homeschool. There is an article on the website called Decision to Homeschool that sort of talks about and outlines how what I guess eventually led us to pull our kids from public school and decide to homeschool our boys. In fact, I'm sitting live in the CUNY classroom where I homeschool my kids. Homeschooling is certainly not for everybody, but some parents like me, you get to a point in your child's disorder where you really don't have a choice. And some parents will end up homeschooling out of necessity. For me, my 12-year-old son, who is bipolar, started having hallucinations, which is very common with bipolar disorder. He started having auditory hallucinations, in other words, voices in his head saying mean, scary things, and visual hallucinations, guys with big bloody knives standing over his desks wanting to murder him. And this was happening all day, every day. So, he was unable to focus. It was not fair to the other students to have the teacher constantly stopped to help him. So we decided to pull him. At the same time, my 11-year-old son, who is autistic, was in the 4th grade and really starting to get into that age where everything's social. People are learning how to make friends, and there's cliques and groups out at recess, and all the cool kids play soccer, and all the nerds, hang out by the swings. You know what I'm talking about. And for somebody who has high-functioning autism, where interpersonal skills are so difficult, he got to the age where people were making fun of him because he wasn't very verbal, he wasn't very social, and the anxiety of going to school every day was becoming too overwhelming. So I pulled them both at the same time and made the decision to homeschool. Again, very personal decision. If your child remains in public school, which many of them do, there's a wonderful support network there, immediately call your school and schedule a 504 meeting. If you're interested in homeschooling, again, there's an article on the website called Decision to Homeschool. You can read more about what led us to that final decision. The next piece of the puzzle, wow, this one's a tough one. I know where you are, and with all the stuff that's already happened and all the stuff that's probably swirling in your head, you're feeling so overwhelmed. Your child was just diagnosed with something that sounds so scary. It's a stressful time, and I get that. I've been there. I remember that generally one of the things that added fuel to the fire of frustration for us was the difficulty we faced as parents in disciplining our children with mental health disorders. Disciplining children with mental health disorders is often not even close to the same as disciplining children who don't have mental health disorders. I'll just tell you that right off the bat. If you have one child that has a mental health disorder and one child who doesn't, you're going to parent them differently. You're absolutely going to discipline and parent them differently. So for me, to help with this, it's imperative to establish the next sort of puzzle piece that's at the core, and that is rules of engagement. And by rules of engagement, I mean rules of engagement in relation to discipline. It will certainly vary for the specific disorder and circumstances, but over the last 5 years, I've learned that there are a few necessities that are consistent across the board for most, if not all, children who have mental health disorders. First of all, safety is always first. And as a new mom whose child may have just very recently been diagnosed, that might sound scary to you. But if you have a child who throws tantrums or has meltdowns, who gets physical, who hits, who kicks, who rages, safety for you and your family needs to be the number one priority every day, without exception, unequivocally, the end, period. Period. Identifying sort of an escalation plan to ensure safety is maintained in your house at all times is a priority, a major priority. If you are married, that's something that you need to sit down and discuss with your partner. But what is your plan to protect every member of the family? Many kids who have disorders that involve psychosis or raging often pick on a younger sibling. What is your plan going to be to keep that younger sibling safe? Establishing a safety plan early on will make it so much easier if you have to experience a situation where you or one of your children is not safe. You'll already have in your mind what you're going to do. If your child is raging and attacking a younger sibling, that is not the time to identify what a safety escalation plan should be. You need to identify it now in the beginning so that when that happens, you go into robot mode and you know exactly what to do. As far as rules of engagement go, you've got to understand early on, you simply cannot, I repeat, cannot engage a child who is having a meltdown. No matter how that meltdown presents, it's going to present differently for different kids. You have to wait until that meltdown is over and the child is completely calm before you discuss what triggered the meltdown. Now let's talk about this for a second, because this is completely counterintuitive. If you're like me, and you probably are, before my children were diagnosed, if my kid threw a tantrum in the store, or because it was bedtime, or whatever the scenario was, I would instantly say, now son, you can't do that. You need to stop. No, you can't have a candy bar right now. You need to stop yelling. You need to go to bed. And every time they wouldn't do what I said, my voice would raise just a little bit, and the yelling would get just a little bit louder and a little bit louder and a little bit louder. And that's how I dealt with it. You just wait for them to finally hear you. Like if my voice got louder, then they would hear better. Well, when your child has a mental health disorder and they're having a meltdown, that is the exact opposite of what will happen. If you engage in any way, whether you yell or not, trying to argue or talk your child down during a meltdown, it is only going to add fuel to the fire. I mean like gasoline, raw alcohol to the fire. It is only going to enrage them more. They simply cannot, they don't have the capability in a mental health meltdown to understand where you're coming from and process in that moment. You have to wait until they're calm before you engage in a conversation about it. And then, if any consequences are going to be issued, the consequences need to relate to the decisions that led up to the meltdown and not the meltdown itself. So let me say that. Number one rule of engagement is, if you're going to issue consequences or punish, whatever word you prefer, the consequences must relate to the decision that led up to the meltdown and not the meltdown itself. And I have to tell you, this is probably the most emotional part for me to talk about, because I didn't get this in the beginning. took me about 4 years of trial and error and doing all the wrong things before I really understood and have been able to implement this concept. It looks good on paper, right? It's easy. Oh, okay, I'll just wait till they're calm, and then we'll just sit down and we'll have a little tea party, and we'll talk about how the consequences are related to the actions that led up to the meltdown and not the meltdown. And then we'll hold hands and we'll skip off into the sunset, right? Like it looks so easy on paper. But I assure you, it's not so easy. It's not that simple. Not at all. For example, my son, my bipolar son, wasn't diagnosed until he was 7. Prior to that diagnosis, there were many meltdowns. And at the time, I just didn't understand them. You know, I've had the moment where people stare because we're in a parking lot and I'm trying to get my son in the car seat back then, and he was thrashing and kicking me and screaming so loud it'd make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, and everybody's staring thinking, what kind of crazy mom can't get their kid in a car seat? I've been there. My son used to hit me, and at 6 or 7 years old, you would think that it wouldn't be strong, but when your child is out of control, having a meltdown or a bipolar rage or anything like that, they are fiercely strong. And it would upset me so bad that he would hit me, and I didn't really understand why. And it was difficult. It was difficult not to engage and yell and scream and try and make him feel guilty for hitting me. I used to do that all the time. I can't believe you just hit your mom. I do all this for you. Because I didn't know how to handle it better. I didn't have anybody giving me advice on how to walk through that at the time. I used to get kicked. In fact, one time I got kicked, I lost my footing so bad that I tore up my knee and had to have knee surgery. I've been there. One time, he was angry in the car, and he was sitting behind me, and I was driving, and he kicked the back of my chair so hard it was very difficult to drive, and there was nowhere for me to pull over. I was on a 2-lane road with no side. And then he started hitting the back of my head while I was driving. And I was so scared, and I was yelling and screaming for him to stop, that it wasn't safe, and stop, and stop. And I was yelling, but I didn't know at the time that I was only adding fuel to the fire. And the kicks got harder, and the hits in the head got harder, until finally we were driving by a fire station. And I almost flipped the car, screeching the tires to turn into that fire station. And I grabbed my kid, who was 7 years old at the time, who had been hitting me in the back of the head, and I took him into the fire station, and I asked the fireman to explain to him what happens when you distract the driver. And the fear of taking him in the fire station made him calm down immediately. And I was calm because I was talking in a calm voice to the fireman. Well, the fireman took him in the back of the ambulance and pretty much scared the life out of him as far as, accidents and what can happen when you distract the driver. I will never forget that moment for as long as I live on this earth. And it was a moment where I knew I was doing something wrong, but it took me about 4 years to figure out what I was doing wrong. But now I can tell you, I know I was engaging when he was having the meltdown. And I know now that I can't do that anymore. And I haven't done it for about a year. And when he rages now, he's just sort of ignored. He goes to his place where he calms down, and then we have a conversation about it. And ever since we got him stable and we enacted that, I haven't been hit, I haven't been kicked, we haven't visited our local fire station. It's made a world of difference. And so I really wanted to share that with you in hopes that it will make a world of difference for you as well. Whew, okay, now as my bipolar son is older, he just kicks holes in walls and when he's angry or having a meltdown, and that's just something that we deal with. But my point is, in the beginning, I used to punish for hitting me and kicking me and, kicking a hole in the wall. And not for the bad choices that led to him becoming angry enough to hit me or kick me or punch a hole in the wall. Once that switch goes off, I always tell people I can see the switch in my son's eyes. I know exactly when he's going to lose control. And once that switch goes off and they lose control, you can't punish them for what they do. They're not in control of what they can do. What you can give them consequences for are the decisions that they made that led to them losing control. And I just can't stress that enough. That has made a world of difference. The same goes for my autistic son. My autistic son screams so loud, it will literally hurt your ears. The dog runs under the bed almost every time he goes into an autistic meltdown with his screaming. We used to punish him for the screaming and the thrashing on the floor and the not listening while I was yelling at him while he was thrashing on the floor. When we really should have been punishing him for the bad choices he made when he was in control that led him to thrashing on the floor. But now we know better. But it took us 4 years to discover that we were disciplining completely wrong. And that's why it seemed like nothing was working. And, it really added to the overall stress and anxiety in our house. I mean, it was awful. It was hard. It was hard to face every day. But 4 years later, we're getting it right. And I hope that sharing that with you will help you get it right so it doesn't take 4 years. There are several articles on my website that go into more detail about the rules of engagement. One is actually called Rules of Engagement. One is called T is for Tantrum, M is for Meltdown. And one is called, a real recent article I wrote called Coddling the Disorder. So look for those for more information on sort of the rules of engagement. Okay, no more crying. Let's move on. The next piece in the puzzle, remember we're working on our core pieces here. Get this up where you can read it. The next piece in the puzzle is something that really kind of happens simultaneously with all the other things we've talked about. It's kind of interwoven with everything we've discussed so far. And that's becoming a student of the disorder. Now, you've got to instantly become a student of your child's disorder. I mean, along with everything else you have on your plate, you have instantly got to become like a grad student getting your PhD. It's something that you'll start the very minute your doctor gives you a diagnosis, and to be honest, you will likely not finish until you leave this earth. It never stops. I never stop researching. I never stop learning. I mean, you've got to research. You've got to research everything related to your child's disorder. You have to get your hands on every bit of information that you can. Western medicine approaches, alternative medicine approaches, crazy ideas that you might consider completely like wackadoodle when you first read them. You got to get your hands on every bit of information that you can. Become a student of the disorder. And then you can kind of like a funnel begin to sort of weed out and whittle down the techniques and the things that don't feel right or don't work for you until you're able to sort of define what your normal is. I mean, for us, our normal now with both boys includes medication. We do use Western medication. I'm a firm believer, especially for my son who's bipolar, that without the medication, he has no quality of life. We use oils. Essential oils work great for us. We use therapy. We have a psychotherapist. We use a chiropractor. We've seen some great results. Recently, we've been doing chiropractor for about, 6 months, 9 months. I've seen some great results. We've done some diet changes. I've read about wackadoodle things. I've tried some wackadoodle things. And you know what? That's okay because I'm a student of the disorder. Nobody knows my kids better than me. So nobody is better equipped to research and funnel down all the information that's out there to determine what will work for my kids better than me. I can do it in conjunction with the doctors because the doctors, Western medicine doctors, psychiatrists, they only do medicine. Therapists only do therapy. Alternative medicine people typically only do alternative medicine. So they all have their thing. But what they don't have is the knowledge about my children that I have. They don't have the knowledge about your children that you have. So you have to work in conjunction with them, researching so that you can say, I read about this. How does it work? My son is ABC. I think this might help. What are your thoughts on it? You have to become a student of the disorder immediately. You have to define your new normal before you can embrace it. You know, the concept behind my website is to embrace your normal every day. It changes minute by minute, but I choose to embrace those changes. But I can't embrace them unless I know what they are. I can't embrace a normal if I can't define the normal. So you have to become a student of the disorder so that you can help define it and help your child define what their new normal is going to be. And then you see the light at the end of the tunnel and you're able to embrace that new normal. Some articles on my website that can help you increase your knowledge base and learn sort of how to become a student of the disorder. A couple of them are Honesty is the Best Policy, The Drug Maze, The L Word, Psychosis is Not My Friend. It's one of my personal favorites. Psychosis is not my friend, I assure you. But those are some articles that you may find some additional information that will help you. Now, the very final puzzle piece in our core that we're trying to establish, if I can pick it up here, is finding a support community. Finding a support community. Look, I know you feel very alone right now. I have been there. I know that you feel like no one in the world understands. Taking me back. I know that you feel like there may even be members of your family who don't understand. You try and tell people your neighbors don't understand. They don't understand why you don't come outside as much. They don't understand why they always hear yelling at your house. You just feel like you're alone in the world, and I understand. But the best advice I can give you to combat that deep, dark, emotional space of loneliness that I know you're feeling, whether you admit it or not, is to find your sense of community. Whatever that may look like, family community, friends community, church community. It doesn't matter how that community is defined as long as you find that support community. A support community that will help you put those pieces together. When your child goes into a different season of life and 100 more puzzle pieces fall down that you have to figure out, you're going to need your support community to help figure out how those puzzles fit. So don't stall in working on finding a support community. I mean, there's so many resources out there, so many groups. You just have to find the community that speaks to you where you are in your journey right now. It might change. You know, a great support community that you find right now in this moment, being recently diagnosed, may be a different support community than you find 5 years down the road, like where I am. I need different support now than I did sitting where you were 5 years ago. But I encourage you so strongly not to walk this journey alone. Not to walk this journey alone. Because if you walk it alone and you push those emotions down and you say to yourself, look, I got this. I'm going to take care of my kids. I got this. No problem. And you don't have anybody helping take care of you, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. Equally as important for me in finding a support community early on, equally as important for me was identifying early on that as a mom of 2 children with mental health disorders, you know, this whole bipolar and autism thing was much bigger than me. You know, I thought, as I mentioned early on, that I could get my arms around it and I could control it, but I learned pretty quick that I couldn't. It's much bigger than me. These disorders that my children have are much bigger than me, and I think I'm a pretty strong chick. Much bigger than me. So I got my kids in therapy almost immediately with a psychotherapist. And what made this such a fruitful decision for our family and for me personally was I decided to start therapy right away also with the same therapist. Now let that sit for a minute. With the same therapist. For me, the same therapist was key. Nobody understood what I was going through with my boys better than their therapist. In fact, she knows better what's coming down the pike. She knows exactly what I'm going to be facing a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. She knows. And going to the same therapist, in other words, working with her in conjunction with my boys, has proved to be so invaluable that, I can't even find the words to tell you how valuable it has been for me. Years later, I still look forward to my every other Saturday me time with my therapist. She keeps me sane and focused on the prize. I so desperately needed that when I was where you are, and I know that you do too, because I know what you're experiencing. I so desperately needed that, and I know you will. I know you will too. The great thing about having the same therapist is, think about it. If I took my boys to therapy and my therapist, at the end they talk to you and they tell you how it went. If I saw a different therapist, then when I went to see the different therapist, I would spend half my time just repeating what the boys' therapist told me so that my therapist could help me with what the boys' therapist told me. And that just wastes a lot of time. And, my therapist has a different perspective of the boys because she sees them in session. And I could probably do a 12-hour long session on this topic, but it has just proven to be invaluable for me. I encourage you to get your kids in therapy if it's appropriate for the disorder that they have, and for you to see the same therapist as well. There just are no words. She's helped me and the boys learn coping skills for every aspect of their disorders. She's taught all of us how to celebrate and appreciate the wins. And let me tell you how big that is. Learning how to appreciate and celebrate the wins, no matter how small they are during your journey, it's just huge. Because parents that have children with mental health disorders appreciate the wins, even when they're so teeny tiny and small, more than a mom who has children without mental health disorders. And my therapist helped me find that shine and that sparkle and that win in every situation. And I so appreciate that gift, because now we celebrate the wins, no matter how small. We don't just celebrate if you win baseball games and football games on the weekend like a lot of moms do. We celebrate if you went to the store and didn't have a tantrum. If you went all day without your first reaction being anger and yelling. We celebrate the small stuff. And it was an incredible gift that she gave me and my boys in teaching us how to celebrate those wins. Personally, she's taught me not to lose myself in the disorders, because let me tell you, it would be so easy for me to just lay in bed every day in a fetal position, in a very dark space, crying all day, refusing to get out of bed, refusing to deal with life, just saying this is too much and this is too overwhelming. Oh my gosh, I can't even tell you how easy that would be. And I know you feel the same way, because you're 100 times more overwhelmed than I am right now. I know that there are days that you wish that you could do that. But the reality is that path, if you choose that path of laying in bed and crying every day and not facing it, that path has dire consequences for you and your family. Dire consequences for you and your family. So you just can't go there. And my therapist helped me learn how to not lose myself in my child's disorders, my children's disorders. She taught me to live life to the fullest, to see the light at the end of the tunnel. She gave me my sparkle back in my eye. She helped me learn to embrace my new normal, to grab onto it like a dog and just not let go. And I'm so grateful for that. That's sort of how this website and all of this came about, is through walking through that journey with my therapist. And there just are no words to express my gratitude for all she's done for us. And I can't emphasize how critical this support piece of the puzzle will be for you in the coming days, the coming weeks, the coming months, the coming years, the coming decades. It's just so critical. I hope that you can find the type of support that works best for you, grab onto it like that ferocious dog, and just never let it go. Never let it go. On the website, there's a couple articles that sort of relate to the support topic as well. One is To Therapy or Not to Therapy is the name of the article, and the other one is Living in the Present Tense. So that will sort of help you deal with the last core puzzle piece, finding a support community. So we've walked through all 6 of these pieces. All 6 of these pieces that form a core, that form a firm foundation, so that as you go through life with your child who has a mental health disorder and more pieces are constantly thrown at you, you've got a strong foundation to work from. You know, in closing, I do hope that you found this video to be helpful. I really do, from the bottom of my heart. It's truly become my passion and dare I even say calling to reach out to other mental health moms who are just beginning their journey and see if sharing parts of my journey can help them in some small way. Even if it's a tiny way, it's worth sharing my story. Your journey will most certainly be unique. It will be different than mine, but there are similarities that are woven into every mental health mom's journey. And those similarities are what I try and address and focus on my website. What worked for me may not work for you, but I figure sharing my journey may at least give you a starting point. And I just hope that it did. I encourage you to please add your thoughts and your comments in the section below. You know, how would you answer as a mental health mom? How would you answer the now what question? If you're watching this and you've been a mental health mom for a while, how would you answer the now what question? What tip or trick or advice would you give a new mom who's just finding out that their child has a mental health disorder? Even the smallest idea, the tiniest bit of information, a sentence or two may help a new mom dealing with their child's diagnosis and help them feel less overwhelmed. And I can't think of a more beautiful gift that you could give somebody who's going through the same struggles that you've gone through. I can tell you that the content of this video can be found in written article format on my website, www.embraceyournormal.com. Under the same name, My Child Was Just Diagnosed, Now What? You'll be able to find it there if seeing it in written form or you want to go back and look at any of the text. I wish you the best of luck in your journey. Remember to keep those core pieces of your puzzle together so that you have a very strong foundation to build from. Thanks so much. Y'all take care and have a great, great week. Bye-bye.